America's center of power changed, and with it, the dynamics of the political landscape. The consequences will reverberate locally, in Florida, on Capitol Hill, and on the global stage. Voters demanded change on the issues that mattered most: the economy, immigration, and social issues. Now, News 4 Jax goes beyond the headlines with political analysts who provide unique context and perspective. Experts focused on the issues making headlines. This is Politics and Power.
Today on Politics and Power, how both the Democrats and Republicans plan to use what's in the recently signed mega bill, or big beautiful bill if you will, to their advantage to try and win or maintain control of the House in the 2026 midterm elections. Now, in the world of politics, a cudgel is defined as using something as a weapon or tool to attack or pressure an opponent. It implies a forceful and often aggressive approach in political discourse and debate. Talk with Democrats and they will tell you they firmly believe that Donald Trump and the GOP Congress handed them a cudgel and they're ready to use it as a tool heading into the 2026 midterms. What is it? Oh, it's that big, beautiful bill, President Donald Trump's tax and spend mega bill. But to be effective, the Democrats have to mobilize and unify and message in a very different way than in the past and harness that energy very quickly because 2026 midterms are quickly closing in. It's closer than you think. Welcome to Politics and Power. Bruce Hamilton joining me, my friend, political analyst Daniel Cronrath. Thanks for being here as always.
Thanks for having me, Bruce.
So let's start with perception and reality. The president's under the impression the public is on board with the measure. Public opinion polls paint a starkly different picture. Here's the deal. When he signed the domestic policy legislation, the president says his domestic policy legislation is the single most popular bill ever signed. And he added, "I can say very proudly that our country is more proud right now than it has been in many, many years." Well, Mr. President, several polls provide a fact check. A Fox News poll. Fox News showed 59% opposed, 38% in favor. A Quinnipiac poll recorded 55% opposed with only 29% supporting the legislation. A Pew Research Center survey found 49% opposed versus 29% in favor, a large percentage unsure. Now, the bill does extend tax cuts from Mr. Trump's first administration. It also will add trillions to the national debt and have a profound impact on seniors, students, and children, not to mention states that will have to make tough decisions to pick up the slack. Daniel, the president in for a wake-up call here?
Well, once again, Bruce, thanks for having me back. This is a very, very interesting situation, and I think probably the most telling thing, as you pointed out, is the Fox News poll. When you're living in today's Donald Trump second term of his administration, and you have 59% of Republicans who are rejecting the big, beautiful bill, who are opposed to it, the first thing we have to look at is why. Why, in the first time, really, within the Republican Party specifically, well, this is obviously the general population, 59% are opposed. But by definition, that means that there's a good chunk of Republicans who are also opposed.
But we also have to realize, who is Fox News going to poll?
Well,
They're
that's
going
right.
to poll Fox viewers.
Well, that is true. I mean, Fox does a better job than a lot of polling organizations. And, that would be a great topic for a future episode, is to bring Mike Bender on from the University of North Florida and kind of talk about the bias which is inherent to a lot of our polling. Fox, in my opinion, actually does a fairly decent job, say, versus Rasmussen reports, which are very, very right-leaning, to the extent that they're not even still using cellular phones. They're still using landline phones,
right.
Which who disproportionately are you going to be surveying who's still using a landline phone, for example?
It also depends how you couch the question.
Obviously, the wording of the question and all kinds of other techniques, which I would be interested in seeing myself, even though I teach political science in a future show. Because that field, by the way, is changing so much, Bruce. The whole idea, by the way, in public polling that people are still picking up their telephone. I mean, how many was the last time you just picked up a number you didn't know on your phone?
Never.
Yeah, well, that's
It's
the point.
spammers.
And it's really making the science and the art behind polling is really changing. Anyway, back to your point. When you get things to your extent of there are a percentage of Republican voters out there who have been conditioned to believe that the national debt is going to destroy the United States, okay? And now here, inarguably, you have the Republican lawmakers who voted for this bill just saying, oh, ignore the Congressional Budget Office, they're wrong. Well, that's kind of transparent at this point, that both political offices like the CBO when they like it, don't like the CBO when they don't like it. But still, to your point, if you are somebody out there who has been believing the narrative of, say, Rick Scott, a Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, these guys who we really know as debt and deficit hawks, and then you watch both of them vote for the president's bill, while even on Fox News and Newsmax, you're seeing the projection of trillion-dollar deficits, or $2 or $3 trillion in additional debt over the next 10 years. you're looking at that bill saying, hey, wait a minute, that's not what I have always been long to conditioned to support. If you're somebody living in rural America that Donald Trump reached out to, perhaps twice in running for president, and you've seen your quality of life deteriorate because you've seen manufacturing jobs offshored. You've seen the quality of the towns in which you've lived in become riddled with things like fentanyl and other, and overdose deaths, right? And then you look at the idea that within this bill, even from conservative estimates, that Medicaid cuts and Medicaid funding, which is going to keep your hometown hospital open. This is not hyperbole. This is not made up stuff, Bruce. Over the next 10 years in the United States, you will see, coming from a rural area, we've already lost community hospitals prior to this. When you're talking about large percentages of the population that the only kind of medical insurance they actually have is Medicaid. It's the only thing they can get. And now they're going to be going to the emergency room, which still, by the way, Bruce, we do not allow people to die in emergency rooms. We treat them there, often for things which are insanely expensive that could have been, taken care of at the preventative end. The point of it is that these are the base conservatives who worry about the national debt and deficit. Rural Americans who liked Donald Trump's agenda, but who are now going to see their Medicaid and their food stamp assistance cut. He's cutting with this big, beautiful bill right at the heart of what should be his big, beautiful base. And that's why you're seeing this public polling swing against the president, in my opinion. And
people go, well, why did my legislator vote for it? It's because they were afraid for their jobs. They were afraid that if they didn't, Donald Trump wasn't going to back them. They were afraid that their egos would be bruised. They were afraid that they weren't going to keep their jobs.
And by the way, if your primary concern as a Republican lawmaker is keeping their job, if that is your primary concern, then you're absolutely correct, because Donald Trump has proved masterful at making good on his threats to primary people or to get them out of the party's good graces. We've seen a lot of politicians, going all the way back to his first terms, names that now seem like distant memories, like Senator Jeff Flake from Arizona, guys who had always been rock-ribbed Republicans who just happened to step afoul of Donald Trump. The next thing you know, their political careers are over.
Look at Josh Hawley now. Always say, we got to finesse this a little bit. It's like, why didn't he stand his ground? But we're going to talk about somebody from North Carolina who's like, you know what, I'm not worried about my future. I'm going to stand my ground. We'll get to that.
Senator Tillis, yeah.
I'll get to what the Democrats' rallying cry will be in a minute, but I feel I need to set the stage here about some realities with this bill. What's in that bill violates a key promise the president made. President Trump made repeatedly during the campaign, not to touch Medicaid benefits. And consequently, as you pointed out, millions, 70-some million, stand to lose their health care. That is a reality. And when it sets in, people are going to be ticked off.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that they've been trying to highlight here, Bruce, and selling this, what they've been badging as a reform of the Medicaid system, what they're really not saying, and this is absolute fact, we know this because of enrollment figures, there are 7 million senior citizens in the United States who are on both Medicare and on Medicaid because their assistance is so little. And the one thing, especially for anyone who's older in your audience who may be near Medicare or on Medicare, we know that the three things that are not covered through traditional Medicare are three of the most important things to people as they age: their eyes, their ears, and their teeth, because those services aren't included with their basic Medicare. So either you have the ability, say, Bruce, to have a Medicare Part C plan, you have the ability to pay out of pocket, or if you are one of the 7 million Americans who are going to be losing this over the course of the next 10 years, you rely on Medicaid to provide you with those services. And now that's going to be lost. So these aren't the 18-year-olds who are sitting around in their parents' basement, and I've heard this from Republicans, maybe you ought to get a job instead of being in your mom's basement playing video games all day long. Well, first of all, able-bodied men over the 18, Bruce, have never gotten Medicaid. They don't qualify for it. So that's erroneous straight from the beginning. But the other thing I would ask everybody to look at when you're really looking at these cuts, outside of the cuts and the billing requirements of rural hospitals, to your point, are those seniors out there, Bruce, who probably a lot of them voted for this president twice, who through no fault of their own because of age cannot go out and work any longer. And now we're going to be breaking what at one time, Bruce, was part of our social contract with these individuals.
You're talking about the work requirement. They can't work. They don't have the ability to work. And fewer who need help getting food will get it. Local food banks are not ready to handle the burden to be placed upon them. Kids who rely on, school lunch programs aren't going to get the one good meal a day that they rely upon.
It's funny, and this is something that, being interested in education, obviously, I think about all the kids out there. And it used to be a joke, Bruce, about how terrible school lunches were. Mm-hmm. And, if you had the ability to pack a lunch for your kid, you did, because the quality of the school lunch was so terrible. And then, of course, we get into the nutritional aspects of the school lunch and how, it's been very questionable in terms of what's being provided. The reality is on the other side of this coin, Bruce, when you focus on poverty in America and you focus on the least among us, who are in our society. That school lunch, that free and reduced lunch for millions of kids in the United States is the only reliable meal they have in their life, Bruce. So we can ask the question, and we can try to use the private sector, and we can try to use our churches and our faith-based groups to compensate for that. But at the end of the day, how does a child learn? How does a child grow? How does a child become a functioning, capable adult when through the formative years of life, Bruce, we're sending them to school hungry? It makes no sense considering the small amount of money in a country now which is going to have over a $1 trillion defense budget, Bruce, in a country that can find its way to give billions of aid to countries all over the world in causes that we could argue about their value or their not value to the United States, and we have in the past on programs, not to be able to provide a child with a nutritional meal twice a day, I consider it a failing of our country, and I consider it to be not just a hunger crisis, but a moral crisis.
People with Affordable Care Act policies will have more difficulty getting the coverage they need. Another failure of this act, and people are blind to what's coming their way.
What was the question again?
Affordable Care Act. People who can't get insurance coverage.
This is probably the biggest slam dunk for the Republicans, is the whole idea, and let's be honest about this, embedded in their DNA of getting rid of Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act.
And, people are going to go, oh, it's Obamacare. No, it's Affordable Care Act coverage. Don't tie a name to it.
And quite frankly, considering the advantages, and Obamacare was not perfect. The Affordable Care Act still left, by low estimates, 25 million Americans uninsured right now as we speak, even through passage of the ACA. Now, a lot of that was because we still know that today there are 10 Republican states who never increased their Medicaid threshold in order to actually cover people. I think some 2 million of them were located here in Florida alone, okay? But that being said, Obamacare accomplished a lot of good things, not being thrown off at plans because you had a pre-existing condition, not having caps on your lifetime of coverage. A lot of positives came out of Obamacare. So, from my perspective, if you're looking at it as a public policy, I always found the Affordable Care Act to be incomplete, okay? It did not go far enough in actually covering Americans.
It is.
It's incomplete. That being said, the idea now of trying to repeal these aspects, roll back any Medicaid assistance that states have already been collecting, to increase the burden on those states to continue whether they want to provide Medicaid or not. Again, I would much rather the president just come out tomorrow, do a press conference and say, I've got something new, it's called Trump Care, and then just rebadge the whole thing and we keep the Affordable Care Act, and he can call it Trump Care for the rest of his administration. Because at least that way people are keeping the health care and access to health care, Bruce, that they are able to enjoy now.
Yeah, what's in the name? Doesn't matter what's in the name, it's what's in the policy.
What's in the policy?
Let's get into the politics of this. I talked about, this big mega bill being a cudgel. So let's see how much of a cudgel, how much of a weapon it can be for both Democrats and Republicans. Let's start with the Dems. Is this where Democrats are going to find their bravado after wandering in the political wilderness, if you will? Is it on these issues?
Well, listen, this could be a tremendous cudgel for the Democrats, particularly since next year, Bruce, is when we hit the midterm elections, and it's going to be next year when these policies go into play, okay? You're going to see right now in our news cycles, you're going to see a lot of right-wing pundits, and rightly so, pointing out, hey, listen, we just passed the big, beautiful bill and things have only gotten better, right? That's because none of the ramifications of the big, beautiful bill are hit yet. And sadly for the Republicans, if you're a Republican, they're going to be hitting at the time which is the worst possible for you when marginal Republicans are trying to defend House seats. That they're going to have to be going on the campaign trail and saying, yeah, I voted for the big, beautiful bill. How's your life doing? What? You've lost your Medicaid? What? Okay. And that's what they're going to have to be facing at the time. But here becomes the question, Bruce, that we talked about previously on this program. It's not just enough to have a cudgel. It's not just to have a tool or a hammer. It could be the hammer of Thor, okay? Who's wielding it, all right? Are we to expect that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and these longtime institutional Democrats who have promised a ton while delivering a little, is that hammer or is that cudgel that you speak of really going to be sufficient if they're not willing to basically go in and use it hard, okay? We saw recently, and again, if you're somebody on the progressive left who listens to your program, I remember very, very well in 2018 when the squad came into Congress, and there was only like a 5-member majority for the Democrats, and there were cries for things like, demand a vote on Medicare for all, see what members are for that, demand a vote on increasing the $15 minimum wage. And what did the squad and the other members of the progressive left did? They caved, they collapsed, okay? This is a consistent Democratic strategy. Talk big, lots of bravado. In the end, take the pulse of where your donors are, and then go back to doing whatever you were doing. But in terms of a cudgel, this is, This is only going to get easier for the Democrats as we get closer to the next fall election.
And that brings us to this. They've got to be unified on these issues, and they've got to, they've got to stick to it. Look, it's no secret the Dems have struggled for quite some time to huddle around a unified message. We saw House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries' record-setting speech trying to stall the bill. Did that give them the momentum upon which to build? Was that a rallying cry?
I mean, not to be, dismissive of what he did. I think it lasts a couple news cycles. Mm-hmm. I mean, and maybe in as fast as our news cycles spin today, that's actually something to be accomplished.
People do have a short attention span.
They have a very short attention span. But the impetus is there. And the other thing, too, before we move off of the Medicaid specifically, everyone in your listening audience, your viewing audience, Bruce, needs to realize the fact, too, that when Medicaid collapses, your premiums will go up even if you have private insurance, if you have worker-provided insurance. This isn't a one-off. Yes, you might not directly lose your insurance that you have through your employer like you and I, but that does not mean that our premiums are going to go up, our deductibles are going to go up, and those plans are going to hit you in the pocket because guess what? Those uncovered people who are still getting aid now who don't have Medicaid but they're getting care, that money is going to be going to us, man. I promise you it is not going to be eaten by United or Blue Cross of Florida.
Yeah, there's no panacea.
No way.
There's no doubt. This is all still an uphill battle. Whispers in the party indicate the Democrats know they need to educate voters. Nearly half of Americans have not heard, it's hard to believe, because people don't read newspapers anymore. People don't listen to the news anymore. People don't care about that's a fact. There's apathy. Nearly half of Americans hadn't heard of the bill according to Priorities USA. Only 8% knew that Medicaid cuts were included. And one political strategist put it this way: the Democrats need to chart a path back to power. They need to capitalize aggressively on the momentum.
Bruce, let me just quickly share before we go to break and talk about other things related to this. I shared with you off air before the program that one of the things that I've heard that the Florida Democratic Party is doing or suggesting that they want to do is opening up their primary elections to NPA registered voters or non-party affiliated voters. I say that, first of all, I consider this to be an excellent opportunity.
Because it gets people involved.
And you now start speaking to a different audience. And, if Chairwoman Freed of the Florida Democrats is able to put this through, you are telling, and I brace yourself for this, the state's 3.8 million registered NPA voters that now you are interested in bringing them into your party. You are interested, even if they're not ready to go all the way with you as a registered Democrat, maybe they're ready to go halfway with you on certain issues, which are important to you, okay? So that, I think, is an excellent opportunity for the Democrats to turn it around in Florida, is just reaching out and trying to capture momentum based on that. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, this plays into something that you and I have talked about before, what influenced the outcome of the last presidential election. It's not who voted, it's who did not vote.
Yeah, and let me say to this point, just full disclosure, I'm a registered MPA. I've been a registered MPA for many, many years now. I have not received a piece, and I am a super voter. Like, I hope all the people who are listening to your show get out there and actually vote. I have not gotten one piece of mail from a Democratic candidate in 3 years in my mailbox. Mm-hmm. Completely ignored. I've gotten them from Republicans, from Daniel Davis to John Rutherford to a variety of other people running for office. And this isn't a matter of funding. Recent Democratic candidates, I mean, with great respect, Donna Deegan had enough money to send me a mailer. But somebody in the Democratic consulting world is just telling them, no, double down on your constituency that you already have. Don't expand it out to try to reach to a new pool of people. And man, again, if Nikki Freed can change that attitude statewide and they don't start taking for granted the people who are out there who don't feel like they belong to either party, I think it could be going into next year, Bruce, I think that could be a huge home run.
And there's an irony in that, because you would think that the strategists in both parties would sit back and go, who's disenfranchised out there? Who feels disconnected? Who should we reach out to? Because they're the people, we want in our camp because they feel like they don't, we want to make them feel like they belong.
Yeah, but here's the problem, Bruce. If you're sitting already in a seat which you're comfortably engaged in and you're a Democratic or Republican lawmaker, and now you're suggesting that you're going to let MPAs participate in your primary, or you're going to empower people who don't want to be part of your party, how do I know I'm going to keep my seat? I mean, that really comes back to the real question at this point. How do I know that changing the game and adding MPAs to a primary, will I potentially get primaried by somebody? How will that change the complexion of the seat that I actually hold right now? And also, too, and I know this is going to sound like inside baseball, but this is why we talk about politics and power. I promise you that the one group out there who hates this idea of MPA registered voters participating in Florida primaries is Democratic strategists and consultants. They do want to have anything to do with that man. They have had a canned script that they've been using for 20 years. And oh, by the way, every time the Democrats have taken a bath here in Florida, especially in recent years, have you seen any of their consultants terminated? No, they're just brought back into the next election cycle to do the same old, stuff, which isn't going to work. It's already proven to be ineffective. It's hard for everybody out there to think about. In 2012, Barack Obama won the state of Florida comfortably. In 2008, he won the state of Florida, okay? It's only been within the last 10 years that Florida has somehow become this deep red state at the presidential level. And I would put that out there to sadly, a lot of the failures of the Democratic Party nationally, not just running bad candidates, because Joe Biden was able to get competitively close in Florida in 2020, but just ineffective campaign consulting, ineffectively identifying where the public is at, actually leaning into popular issues. But again, and I know we need to get going, the one thing, again, in all of these decisions, whether you want to talk about the Republicans or the Democrats, that the audience has to understand, they're going to be following the will of their donors.
Yeah, but don't...
It's all donor-based pushed in terms of policy.
Let's use some simple marketing techniques, like in the advertising world.
Okay.
I used to drive a Ford,
Sure.
okay? I don't have a Ford, by the way. I'm just using this as an analogy. And, now I drive a Tahoe, okay? But they knew that for 20 years I drove a Ford. Mm-hmm. So Ford goes, you know what, I've got your maintenance records. I want to bring you back into the fold. I want to know why you changed.
Yeah.
Can't the Democrats do that same thing? Can't the Republicans do the same thing and say, you know what? I had an idea that used to be a big GOP supporter, and I know you changed. A town hall. Let me find out where your head's at.
Yeah.
There's a way to do that as a marketing strategist and figure out and bring them into the fold of whatever party.
Yeah.
They're just not smart about the way they market, about the way they approach people, because they're so dogmatic, they're so closed-minded.
Yeah, I think, Bruce, this is really going off the script here a little bit. I think for the last 20 or 30 years, I think that the more you've seen a rise in programs and master's degrees programs and undergraduate programs in campaign management, the more you've seen the rise and evolution of things like focus grouping and consultants who will tell you what you should run on versus actually capturing the mood of the people, okay? They've gone into the business now of they want to tell their electorate what's important. They don't want, to your point, they don't want to listen to the electorate to find out what is important.
They want the electorate to listen to them.
They play it. I mean, how many times have you heard Democrats over the last 10, 15, 20 years say, well, we talk to people about kitchen table issues at their kitchen table, and then they come out with policies which are not reflective of where people are actually sitting at their kitchen tables. It's all semantics. It has no real punch, which is why Donald Trump and the populist right were able to get in with a lot of traditional core Democratic constituencies and move the needle in the United States, or move the Overton window in the United States over the last 10 years decidedly to the right. And rather than push back the Democrats, and rather than fight back the party of FDR, the party of making sure that people have secured lives and dignified lives, they've just gone over to the right more economically with the Republicans. They've followed them around. What you now have left, you have the core Democratic constituency, who are now is voting Republican, a la union members voting Republican. I go to monthly meetings of my union here in town, Bruce, so it's a local union consortium. And I can tell you, I've never seen so many Republicans now involved in members of unions because of where that party, where it shifted politically, right? Dude, you and I, growing up in Philadelphia and growing up in Pennsylvania in the 1970s, it was inconceivable to be a Republican in a union. Like, that was the stronghold of the Democratic Party. Today, you're just continuing to see that shift over because that whole block that used to be core to the Democrats getting elected, now they've either tuned out, or worse, they've gone over with the GOP.
It's interesting because I heard a speech by the new Pope, and he just basically said, we've become a society that doesn't know how to listen anymore. And that's basically your point. You've got these political parties, they want to tell you how to think. Yeah. Instead of sitting there and listening, it's like, what's on your mind?
Yeah.
What really worries you? What are you concerned about? And that was the Pope's message.
Yeah.
Sit back. Let's have a dialogue. Let me listen and find out what really you're all about.
It would also be great too, Bruce, is if we could get the Pope to take confessions from both the leaders of the Republican and the Democratic parties. Wouldn't that be healthy?
Oh, they'd be sitting there all year long. When politics and power continues, the Democrats need to square away their messaging and the way they deliver that message quickly, because the 2026 midterms are closing in. That and more. And the Republicans, what do they need to do? We'll be right back. Welcome back to Politics and Power. Bruce Hamilton, political analyst Daniel Cronrath. In an interview with Politico, Danielle Butterfield, the executive director of Priorities USA, said, we have a lot more work to do as a party to communicate the impacts of this bill to voters who are tuning out politics. tuning it out. And she urged Dems to get beyond the stats and start collecting storytellers. Then start putting ads online, particularly on YouTube, not just traditional TV ads. Dems are known for making old cable buys, token digital buys in swing districts, and holding press conferences. Look at what happened in the New York City mayoral primary. Mandani proved that the old way of communicating with voters doesn't work anymore. There are new, more effective ways of getting the message out. They need to understand that. Not just that, but start employing those new communication methods.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree more, Bruce. I mean, I think that it's time for, and first of all, faces like Danielle are exactly what the Democratic Party needs. They need young, energetic people who are willing to get out there and really try to say, hey, listen, we understand that there is a class of Democratic Party leadership here who's been around a very long time. Septuagenarians, octogenarians, still who are in power, with consultants who have worked with them and strategists who have worked with them for decades. But to her point, it's not working, okay? Maybe you can still use a lot of those traditional strategies, Bruce. Like, for example, in demographics where people are 65 and older, okay? One of the most effective ways to reach them on election day is still through the mailbox. Direct mail. They go to their mailbox, they look at it, they process it, they stack it. As a matter of fact, research shows that when you take a piece of direct mail out of your mailbox, most people actually handle it 3 times before they throw it away. So that's 3 opportunities to a very directed voter. You know, you're not wasting on a TV ad, you're sending it to somebody who you know is a super voter, right? Now for 65 and older, that's gonna work. I can tell you how many people I know under the age of 30 who haven't been to a mailbox in years. Okay, so obviously you need to find different ways, different strategies, whether it's social media, TikTok, whatever, Snapchat. Okay, a lot of the things that they're using are the way that you need to be able to reach this younger generation of voters. But then it's not just that too, it's also what are you saying in these messages? To your point, you know, qualitative data is as important as quantitative data, okay? And if you can collect enough qualitative stories, okay, really to make the case, and combine that, and do an ad where you can show somebody who looks like an average, just to use the expression, MAGA voter. Show them the pain next year that they've endured. And while you're showing them their true story, drop that in with a quantification of that pain and say, this is not a one-off story. There are 1.4, there are 4, there are 5 million stories.
This is real life.
Just like this guy you just saw. Hit it home. And, you know, again, this is challenging. In a 30-second, 60-second spot.
Not an actor.
It's challenging. But here's the other thing. YouTube, which is something which is consumed by a lot of younger voters. I watch way too much YouTube, Bruce, because I find it educational. YouTube ads and long ads and opportunities for you to actually get out your message are far less expensive, as you know, than traditional brick and mortar, you know, running ads at your local television station, okay? They're far more effective because, again, with digital media, you can control your target audience. If Daniel Cronrath were running for mayor of Jacksonville and I bought ads from Channel 4, I can't control who's going to be viewing it at any one period of time. I know what your demo is, and I have that data, but who's going to be turning in at that exact moment to see my ad? Digital media, you can completely control your audience.
Yeah, you got the algorithms, yeah.
Yeah.
2026 midterms, we've talked about it. It's not that far away. There's some vulnerability in the Senate. You have the seat being vacated by North Carolina's Tom Tillis. He voted against the bill because of the steep Medicaid cuts, which is very interesting here. He stood on principle, one of the few Republicans who did.
Oh, everyone can stand on principle when they're leaving, Bruce. I mean,
he's choosing to leave. And
Yeah.
I think that, dare I say, his reasons are noble?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that you're finally seeing an individual who can probably speak his mind. I mean, I followed the career of Tom Tillis for a long time. If there's anybody out there in MAGA world who's going to argue his conservative credentials, that would be foolish. Because he is very, very much, when it comes to guns, life, tax cuts, all of those things which have been in the wheelhouse of the Republican Party, he has been a very, very consistent vote.
But I think he also made it clear that he realizes when it comes to health care and some other things, this is why he's out.
Well, it's also, too, I think he also realizes, too, it's a poison pill.
Yeah.
Okay. North Carolina, specifically, is becoming rapidly more blue. Okay. Obama won North Carolina. That was a harbinger of how blue it was becoming. If any have spent any time in the rapidly growing Charlotte market, the Asheville, you know, Wilmington, the Raleigh-Durham, the Tech Triangle. There's a lot of Democrats.
So get out before he's forced out.
Perhaps. That could be what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Looking at. I think also, too, continue that. Georgia is going to prove very interesting as well. Will they be able to replicate the magic they had in 2020 there and allow Ossoff in order to keep his seat, for example? It's going to be very, very interesting in the wake of Donald Trump, in the wake of the 2020 election, with all of the allegations of the governor at the time not doing his due diligence to make sure, and what was the Secretary of State's name? Ratzinger? Yeah. It's going to be very interesting to watch that play out now. And two, by the way, if you're a Republican, just remember, after Donald Trump lost his election and they had the special election, Donald Trump told Republicans not to go out and vote, which is why you have 2 Democratic senators now from Atlanta, because the Democrats didn't hear that message. They saw their opportunity and went out and vote. So Trump really kind of shot his party in the foot at that point in time. But I think Georgia's going to be very, very interesting to watch. Collins in Maine is going to be vulnerable as well. That was not a popular vote for her for most of the folks in Maine. We've seen that Maine recently has been trending a lot more statewide Democrat. You'll recall recently Donald Trump tried to sue the state of Maine because they didn't want to have transgendered high school athletes not play in sports, and he threatened their federal funding. The governor of Maine stood in a meeting of the U.S. governors and said, "I'll see you in court." Well, if you didn't see this, Bruce, in the last week, she won. Okay, the federal court has ruled that the federal government cannot hold federal funding over the state of Maine because they decided not to implement an executive order of the president. That's playing well in Maine, and better believe that Susan Collins is watching how well that plays in Maine, because the governor up there, who is popular, who's a Democrat, has shown that she has a spine.
Oh, she's got a big spine.
Yeah.
Talk about the House. At least a half a dozen districts in play in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, and Wisconsin. Districts that Donald Trump, by the way, won, which is interesting. And I'm also hearing the Democrats are focused on a half a dozen races where there's some vulnerability. You've got Representatives Ann Wagner of Missouri, Maria Elvira Salazar of Florida, Andy Ogles of Tennessee, Kevin Kiley of California, Nick LaLota in New York, and Jeff Crank of Colorado. And the bottom line is that the Democrats need to take some risks here, and they got to build a drumbeat.
Yeah, this is a really, really good list, by the way, Bruce. Sadly, because of the changes after the census, you could have easily had Lauren Boebert, the congresswoman from Colorado, on this list, but they redid her district so that now she's actually in a safe Republican seat, if you can believe it or not. We're going to be blessed with Ms. Boebert, apparently, in Congress now, thanks to the Republicans, for a while longer. But yeah, this is it. The other thing here, which is going to be really important, is candidate recruitment. Who are the Dems going to be running? And as you said before, combining that with the messaging, how are they going to be running in these races? The right Democrats can win these seats, Bruce. These are seats that can be won. And when you're talking about the very, very narrow margins, okay, I'll say nothing has changed this calculation for me. As of right now, projecting into the future, and of course, my opinion, and $1.75 gets you on the JTA, I could see the Dems taking back the House very, very comfortably next year, and seeing the Senate stay with the Republicans, perhaps 50-50, 51-49, giving them control, of course, with a tie-breaking vote of Vice President Vance still performing that role. But I could see the Democrats taking the House back by as much as 25 to 30 seats next year, Bruce.
Yeah, I think that's what most projections are. But I agree with you that the Senate will probably stay GOP and by a very slim majority. So the Republicans, they've got their own strategy for fending off the Dems. They're ready for the attacks. They're ready for the accusations of slashing Medicaid to pay for tax cuts for the rich. They plan to shift the focus. Their hope is to turn things around.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're the GOP, you can first of all hope that these impacts aren't as big as you think that they are, right? And that somehow that we're navigating the course over the fall and into the spring of next year, that the economy continues to hum. Right now, I mean, if you look at new jobs and if you look at the unemployment figure, if you look at inflation coming down to this moment, things are doing well in the Trump economy. But again,
inflation numbers lag.
They lag. Correct. They lag, but they're coming down.
And we'll see what happens with the Fed.
And here's the thing. Well, obviously, increasing interest raes by the Fed, what Jerome Powell decides to do, because he's in a unique position now where the President of the United States is calling out the Fed chair directly. I'm not a fan of Jerome Powell, but I would tell the American people he knows more about the economy than Donald Trump and what to do with interest rates. But that being said, interest rates, tariffs. If Donald Trump actually gets around and doesn't do any more 90-day suspension of tariffs and things along those lines, you want to see inflation? That's going to be the result of tariffs, okay? You're going to be sitting out there.
It's a tax. It's going to drive up consumer prices.
And you're going to see Democratic ads next year with Trump saying things like, you're going to win like you've never won before, while people are unable to buy things like baby strollers, okay? They're going to be able to buy, because these are things that are going to go up, real-world stuff, man. Baby carriages, anything which comes to the United States that we don't make here domestically, because we're throwing a tariff on it, it's going to go through the roof.
Yeah.
And to what end? I mean, we don't wish for this. This is something, we talked about this before. We all hope this doesn't happen. I'll tell you, I hope that Donald Trump is right and that all these things work out swimmingly.
Hey,
okay?
But he's playing a game, but he's also playing with fire here.
Well, he is playing with fire. He's playing with fire, and he's doing this because it sets him apart. It's something that gives him a distinguishing feature. But It's hard how else to defend that, Bruce. When you're living in the year 2025 in a world of global digital currencies, and you're taking advice from Peter Navarro, who's telling you to go back to 19th century trade policy. I mean, even the Wall Street Journal and Forbes and other outlets out there who are conservative are like, what is this? This makes no sense.
Yeah, and it's interesting, if you watch Wall Street right now, it's going like, well, just adopt a wait and see attitude. They're not having a knee-jerk reaction.
Which is what they do with everything.
Well, yeah.
But yes, they are. And I mean, I think one of the reasons why you see the Dow doing so well right now, remember, I mean, we can't forget just a few months ago when Trump first threatened these tariffs, the markets took a huge hit.
Oh, big hit.
They panicked. I mean, everybody out there who has a 401k was like, hey, what happened?
Yeah, and then you know, the cooler heads prevailed.
Right. But still the situation has gone unresolved. You know?
Yeah.
And the last thing I think we need to say about the policy here with the GOP and being able to blindly support the president, to basically claim that you are using emergency powers to enact a tariff, which, by the way, is unconstitutional. Congress has to enact tariffs. And you're going to impose a 50% tariff on the nation of Brazil because you don't like how the Brazilian court system is treating the former president, Bolsonaro? And that's your motivation for using and imposing 50% tariffs on one of our largest trade partners, let alone the largest one in South America, because you don't like what's going on with a buddy of yours? I mean, it's...
So it's interesting that you bring this up because next week my topic happens to be, you know, Trump and basically ignoring the law. You know, he lets politics dictate what he does.
Yeah.
You know, right or wrong, that's just his world.
Right.
And he flirts with that.
Right. And by the way, for people out there, I mean, this is, you take a little time and look at it. There are people who have filed all kinds of lawsuits against this administration. The reality is the only real corrector, the only real balancer in our system of checks and balances are the courts. And by the nature of the courts, they are slow, they are meticulous. Now, are there times that the courts will jump in? Of course they will. Bush v. Gore being the classic example. They couldn't possibly sit that out and wait and not have a president of the United States, so they expedited the entire process, used their power of judicial review and original jurisdiction, and they heard the case, okay? They could do that now, but the problem is that, you know, if you're somebody who is, and I'm not going to say this is even partisan, I'm going to say if you're somebody who would consider yourself classically trained in civics and how good government works, okay? What's going on right now with our court system should be scary. Because
let's talk about the recent ruling from the Supreme Court on birthright citizenship. It wasn't about birthright citizenship. It was about injunctions.
That's correct.
And I don't understand John Roberts on this one. I don't understand it. The checks and balances don't exist.
Yeah. You know, Roberts is one of those interesting people. You know, we talked about him before. He's very, very interested. He is a conservative. He was nominated in 2005 by George Bush. Upon his nomination, he became the head of the Supreme Court. So if you look historically at the role of the courts, Justice Roberts has been he's been the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court for 20 years, okay? He's building himself, at least in years served, the longevity of, say, a Warren Court, okay? Or a Marshall Court. Okay, that's how long his years of service. So you sometimes say, well, is he going to be concerned about the neutrality of the court? Is he concerned about all the public polling figures, Bruce, both conservative and left-leaning and think tanks, who show that the American people have lost confidence in their Supreme Court? Okay, he says he cares about that. We know he obviously wanted to vote down the Affordable Care Act, but found a way to pass it because he was concerned about it. But then to your point, you see him making votes like this. You know, that passed 6-3. Roberts could have easily just voted in dissent to show that there was some sort of, you know, we're not all going to be the 6 conservatives ganging up on every issue. He chose not to your point.
Yeah. Back to the GOP and their GOP strategists. It's that they'll campaign on individual pieces of the bill that poll well, things like tax cuts on overtime and tips, child care subsidies, work requirements for able-bodied adults, and the hope is that will help them avoid what happened in 2018. If you remember your history, the Dems went on the attack against it. Trump's original tax cuts, the Democratic Party's argument then, as it will be now, was that it benefited the wealthy. It cost the GOP, the House, and the Democratic Party won back the House majority. And you think that's what's going to happen in 2026?
I do think it's what's going to happen. And it's going to be interesting. I mean, once people find out what they have to do to actually write off their income tips, and the fact that basically that also will have to replace their standard income, their standard deduction, I think they'll quite understand that that's not what they thought it was going to be in terms of how lucrative it was going to be. And oh, by the way, then you will be at a point in time with the campaigns going on, Bruce, that you're not just going to be able to magically explain that away. Okay, I do think the child tax credits are good. I do think that they made a smart move in not increasing taxes across the board. To their credit, the one thing with the Trump's big beautiful bill that I think would have been political suicide for the GOP is if they had made the decision not to renew those tax cuts. Because again, I'm not in favor of massive tax cuts to the wealthy, but people in 2017 who were lower income and middle income, they still did benefit from a tax cut. So political suicide would have been letting those tax cuts go. To your point, that's the only thing you can do. You can take it just like the Democrats did with the Affordable Care Act. There became a point in time when they couldn't say Obamacare. Why? Because it became toxified by right-wing media. So what do? You break it out into components and you say, hey, isn't it nice to be 26 and be able to stay on your parents' insurance? That was the Affordable Care Act. Isn't it nice not to be dropped from your insurance cover because you just got diagnosed with cancer and you know that you're going to cap out? That was the Affordable Care Act. But again, when you're talking about a media and a campaign cycle driven by sound bites, those are things which are harder to explain, aren't they? And that becomes the challenge for Democrats.
Right, and
it will be the challenge for Republicans.
Right, talking about toxic, and it wasn't part of our original plan to bring this up, but it's very much in the headlines. Jeffrey Epstein. And talk about a cudgel and a weapon. It's something that is a weapon that can be used both against Republicans and against Democrats.
Yeah.
The list, does it exist? Was Jeffrey Epstein an agent for Israel? Yeah. Did he commit suicide? There's so many questions. Yeah. Will it prove a toxic blow for Donald Trump? Will Donald Trump sacrifice Pam Bondi to save himself? Where does this go?
It's a great question. What I would say, first of all, is that human trafficking and obviously sex with minors and this kind of exploitation is gross, disgusting, it's illegal. But regardless of who you might want to see come down on this, if you're a Democrat and you're just hoping that Trump is on this list, or if you're a Republican and you just know Bill Clinton's on this list, the politics of this, to me, are far less of a priority than the idea out there of somebody who was basically operating a honey trap and getting compromat on leaders of both of our parties to serve the interests of a foreign government. Now, we don't know that's the case. What we know that Ghislaine Maxwell's father was definitely a member of Israeli intelligence. They had a connection through there. We know that Epstein had been in contact with his Israeli intelligence agencies many times throughout his lifetime. Okay, was he actively gathering compromat on British, American, Bruce, people from all over the world and all kinds of stripes of life that he was allegedly having at this island? The one thing I can tell you is that in order to get a 20-year conviction for Maxwell or bring charges on Jeffrey Epstein, you have to have victims, okay? And those victims had to have people who victimized them. So to suggest that there's no list might be one of the most bold-faced lies of 2025. There's obviously a list of people out there who frequented that island.
Just for whatever reason.
For whatever reason.
And Maxwell is chomping at the bit to testify before Congress.
Wants to. She actively wants to. She actively wants to. And I think, one of the things that's going to be really interesting in the weeks ahead too, Bruce, is how much political capital are the Democrats going to want to, exert on this, okay? You and I talked before the show. Even if nothing were to happen with this were to float around, when the Dems take control and they have the power of, using their oversight function if they were to get back control of the House, will they actually investigate this? Does the Democratic Party itself actually want to know who is on?
Who would investigate it? There's nobody left in the DOJ.
Well,
they'd have to rebuild it.
Well, I mean, they have their own subpoena powers, though.
Right.
The House would. Yeah, they would have the ability to depose people and bring people in, because they have they have that power. But would they really be interested in to what end? I mean, we know Ro Khanna, for example, congressman from California, just filed legislation at committee level. Not one Republican voted for it. To see it, mm-hmm. So for me, bring it out. I have never seen an issue in my lifetime where people on the left, who are populist-leaning left, is in 100% agreement with the MAGA right and all the influencers, from Megyn Kelly to all of those individuals, the individuals who used to work in right-wing media, who are now the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, and the deputy director, okay?
Yeah,
two of the biggest people who were saying we're going to release these, and now they're like, oh, no, they don't exist. And the last thing I want to say, too, and this is really important because you're going to see, I know you refer to this, more than probably Pam Bondi getting thrown over the...
I think she'll be the sacrificial lamb.
Okay? I promise you, as sure as God made little green apples, Pam Bondi is not doing anything without direct instruction of her boss, the President of the United States. So to throw Pam Bondi under the bus and think that that's going to solve things, Pam Bondi is only doing what she's told to by her boss.
You're Susie Wiles. You're sitting at in the Oval Office with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
You got a little glass of wine. You're like, Donald, here's how we have to handle this.
Well, first of all, it'd be a glass of Diet Coke. Okay.
Who has a Diet Coke.
Yeah, and Susie's not a huge drinker either. I think that what she would be looking at there is I think that you would be her focusing on what her job is as chief of staff, okay? Controlling his
But she's
data,
also his chief advisor.
controlling what's going on. Yeah, I mean, to whatever degree. I mean, it's really difficult. I mean, unless you're somebody who's really in the Republican circles, you know, I'm not. I don't have that kind of access to them. I know that there are others here in North
Nor do
Florida,
I, yeah.
but who clearly do. You know, she's doing what she's done most of her political career. Have you ever seen a more anonymous chief of staff for a president of the United States?
Well, that's Susie.
It is her, but she's been able to.
She does. You know, election night, she didn't even want to come out.
No, I know that. I mean, that's her personality, that's her nature, and that's who she is as a person. But to be able to be in that position of chief of staff to the president of the United States and still remain that kind of anonymity from the public, it's really amazing. But to your point, she's done this her whole life. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know what she's advising him. What I would say about Susie is I will say that she was probably giving him, as she has everyone that Susie's worked for, that I've known since I've known her and I met her in the 2000s, she's giving him the best advice that she can.
Yeah.
Because she's a professional and that's what she does. And by the way, we may not like those policy decisions, but she's committed to the people that she works for, and I'm sure she's trying to do everything that she can to yeah.
So I was going to end this program saying I think that there's a little argument, both Republicans and Democrats see the big, beautiful bill, or whatever you want to call it, as the defining issue of 2026. Now I'm starting to wonder, is the Epstein case maybe one of the big defining arguments going into the midterms?
Bruce, if you know when you have a professional golf tournament and you say, well, who do you think is going to win this tournament? Scotty Scheffler will give that person 2-to-1 odds, or this person. In this case, I'm going to take the field. And the field is going to be some story that hasn't come out yet. Because in this administration, it seems like once or every 1 or 2 months, we have something else which comes on the scene, which is just of such, like, we didn't even bring up Iran and Israel and Gaza or any of those other issues taking place. We didn't bring up the really important issues like Rosie O'Donnell.
You mean taking away her citizenship?
Taking away her citizenship.
Anyway. I could say who else in history tried to take away citizenship, but then you'd write me nasty letters, which you're going to do anyway. Thanks for watching Politics and Power.
See why every day more people are choosing News 4 Jax, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.